Well, I think we were all really surprised that Castro resigned, because we thought on February 24th, when the National Assembly meets to select the Council of State and Ministers, that we would find out then whether Fidel was going to continue or not. And this is a very nice way to do it. Fidel himself is saying thank you very much in a letter to Grama, the state paper. No, this is it. I won't be there. And I think we can certainly plan on the fact that Raul Castro, his brother, will now be given officially the presidency of Cuba. And we'll see the same hierarchy. They'll shift around a little bit. There may be some new faces. But essentially, it will be Cuba's rulers who have ruled Cuba since the revolution. The name of the game in Cuba will always remain staying in power. Raul and the Cuban hierarchy have to stay in power, and they have to do what is necessary to stay in power, which will be allowing some reforms, because the Cuban people want better lives. They don't like the $15 equivalent in pesos for a monthly salary. They're tired of cramped housing. The health care has deteriorated. Raul and the hierarchy, for legitimacy, need to address this, and they'll do it. But they're not going to address the democracy side in any concerted way. And given that they're not going to do that, U.S. policy isn't going to respond. We're going to say, when you get to democracy, come knock on our door and we'll talk to you. We're allowing Raul Castro, Fidel Castro, and the Cuban government to dictate our foreign policy toward Cuba, because it's very much in our interest to empower the Cuban people. How else are we going to get change in Cuba if the Cuban people don't call upon their government to make those changes? But as long as the Cuban people are completely dependent on the government for jobs, for food, for housing, for health care, they're afraid to make that change. They're also somewhat worried about what the United States might or might not do, and what Cuban Americans might or might not do. What they would like to see is Cuban Americans saying, don't worry, we're going to help you, we want to have more contact with you. That's why allowing free travel of Cuban Americans, and indeed of all Americans into Cuba, would only expand the horizons of the Cuban people, only reinforce their desire for freedom, and push the government toward a faster evolution towards some form of democracy. Raul Castro is, first of all, a leader of the revolution, a commander of the rebel forces when they were in the Sierra Maestra. He has been the head of the armed services and has the complete loyalty of the armed services and the security services of Cuba, which are the backbone of the revolution. He is a party secretary of the Communist Party. He is a collegial leader. He'll work with the other people in the hierarchy. And he's completely ruthless, as well as pragmatic. He isn't a people's man. You know, people like to say, oh, Raul, he's a nice family man. Well, he might be a nice family man, but the man is ruthless. He'll do whatever it takes to stay in power, just as his brother did whatever it took to stay in power. In 5 years, maybe Raul will be turning over power. Possibly even there could be elections. There's no real powerful is the wrong word, there's no strong opposition. It's a divided opposition in Cuba and unrecognized, that you could even imagine maybe Laje, maybe Felipe Alarcón, somebody actually among the current hierarchy being elected as Cuba's next president. Because after all, the election is through the National Assembly. It's not, it's not direct election from the population of Cuba in that type of system. This should be the beginning of a process to freedom, to democracy, to economic betterment and stability for the Cuban people. At the same time, we need to look at ways in which we can help them get there. And so far, we've removed ourselves from that equation. And the longer we stay outside that equation, by not having this contact, by allowing this communications embargo, the less we'll have in the way of influence in a future Cuba.